The first thing we are going to do is publish our web API in an Azure App Service. Next, we are going to provoke an error in the Azure App Service and see how to debug it using Application Insights. Finally, we will publish our React application on Firebase. We will also have our web API and our React application in production talking to each other. Let's start this module by publishing our web API to Azure. In this video, we are going to publish our web API into an Azure App Service, which means that in order to follow the steps of this video, you must have an Azure account. So let's go to the Solution Explorer. We are here in Visual Studio, and first let me go to the App Settings Development JSON because I want to copy these values, front-end, connection strings, and key JWT into the app settings file. Remember that the app settings.development.json is the one that is used in development, and the app settings JSON is the one used in production. So here we are going to put the URL of our React application in production. Right now we don't have that because we haven't published our React application, so we're just going to leave this as it is, and also this default connection will get replaced for another connection string that will point to an Azure SQL database in production. But this one, the Azure Storage Connection, will be the one that we will use in production, so we can leave this as it is. Now I want to make something interesting, and it is that I want to delete this key JWT property that we have here. The idea is that I want to provoke an error in production because I want to teach you how to use Application Insights in order to debug errors in production. So for now, we're going to pretend that we forgot to add the key JWT property here in this app settings JSON. Now, what we're going to do is that we're going to deploy this application. So right click on the name of our project, publish. I will say here Azure, next, Azure App Service Windows, next. I am going to look for an Azure App Service. So for that, I will click on plus here, and I will create an Azure App Service. I can give it a name. My subscription is this one. A resource group, we can use the Movies API resource group, which we created earlier in this course. The hosting plan is about what characteristics are going to have the server of our application. For example, it can be free, but it is really limited. Sure, V1, that is basic, V2, V3, as you can see, it has different amounts of memory RAM, and so on. Of course, the better the server, the more expensive it is. I will choose a V1 and I will say OK. Then I will say create. Now, this is creating the Azure App Service. This is creating the place in which we are going to put our web API. But this is not deploying the web API. We are only creating the resource in Azure that will host the web API, but we are not publishing our application just yet. And this is done. Now we can select the Movies API Azure App Service that we just created and click on Next. And here we can skip this step and let me click on Finish. So we are here in this page in which we can configure our deployment. First, I need to come to Service Dependencies because I need to first remove Microsoft Identity Platform because we're not going to use that, and storage because we already configure the storage connection in our app settings JSON file, as you can see here. So I can remove the first one, Microsoft Identity Platform, ignore for this profile, and storage ignore for this profile. Now SQL Server Database, that one we need to configure. So let me click on here. And let me click on Azure SQL Database. As you can see, this will allow us to create a SQL database in Azure, which we are going to use for our database in production. So let me click on plus because I want to create a new database. This will be the database name. This is the subscription. The resource group is going to be Movies API. And I need a database server, so new. The database server is where our SQL database will live, so let me put a unique name. This is fine. Now let me put a location. East US is fine. Now I need to put an administrator username and a password. So let me put this password and keep this information in hand because we're going to use it in just a minute. So let me say OK, and this is done. Now let me create, and this is creating the database server and the Azure SQL database in production. Now this is done. Let me select my Movies API database. Let me click on select, and here we have the database connection string, default connection, and then I will say database connection username. This is the username that I just put, Gavilanch, and then we're going to put our password, which is this one, and I will select Azure App Settings. This means that the connection string will be saved as a configuration option of our Azure App Settings. We're going to see that in just a few minutes. So let me click on next, and let me remove NuGet packages here because we already have all of the NuGet packages we need, and we're going to leave secret store because this way we're going to have available our connection string as we're going to need it in the next configuration. So let me say finish, let me say close, and now let me go here to settings, let me go to .NET 6, click on here, and because I am using a preview version of .NET 6, I need to say here deployment mode self-contained. This means that I will send not only my application to Azure but also the environment in which my application will run. I need to do this because again I am using a preview version, which means that Azure App Service as a whole still doesn't support .NET 6 because it is a preview. So I need to do a self-contained so that I can run my application in an Azure App Service. Now I need to go to Entity Framework Migrations and say apply this migration on publish. This means that after I publish my application, I will run the migrations of my application so that my database is up to date. So let me say save, and this should be it. Now I can click on publish, and this is going to publish our application into production. This may take a few minutes depending on your internet speed connection, so please be patient and drink some water. Alright, so here we have our application. We have a 404 because we don't have anything here, but that is okay. I can say /API genres, for example. Let me press enter, and we're going to get a 500 error. This means that our application is crashing. But why is that? Well, remember that we said that we were going to provoke an error in production. Now I want to debug this error to find out what is going on. We will see that next. In this video, we are going to learn how to debug this 500 error that we have in production. The idea is the following. 500 means that there was an error in our application that made it crash. But okay, what is the detail of the error? What happened? What line of code threw the error? We don't know that. This is just a generic message that doesn't really tell us that much. So we need a tool that will help us investigate the details of this error. For that, we can use Application Insights. With Application Insights, we can have details of our application running in production. For example, we can know the details of errors like this. We can also access a login provider that will allow us to read all of the login messages from our application in production, and so much more. But in this video, we're just going to focus on this, on debugging this error. So how do we configure Application Insights? Well, you can do the following. You can come back to Visual Studio and then go to the Solution Explorer, right click on Movies API, and here you can see Configure Application Insights. I can click on it, and then I will say, here I need this option because I want a connection to an instance running in Azure, because this will be for my application running in Azure. So let me say next. Now I need to create a new instance of Application Insights, so I will say click on this plus sign. Movies API is a fine name, resource group Movies API, location I will choose East US, create, and this is creating the Application Insights instance in Azure. So let me click on it. Next, this will create a connection string for Application Insights. That is fine. I will say local user secrets file because I want to have this connection string available here. So next, and when I say here, I mean here in development. And what we're going to do is that we will remove this because I don't want this to be modifying my code, so I will just leave this as it is. So let me say finish, and this is done, close, and this is configured. Now let me go to app settings, and you are going to see that here we have application insights and connection string, and we have the instrumentation key that represents the instance of our application insights in Azure. Let me go to the startup class, to the configure services method, because here we are going to see that we have this add application insights telemetry, which is the one that configures application insights in our application. If you don't have this, you need to add it. So let me compile my application. Let me see that everything is okay. And now let's deploy the application. Let me go to Solution Explorer, right click here, publish, and this will open this page again. Now I can click on publish, and this is going to publish the new configuration of application insights, which will allow us to see in production the details of the 500 error that we have. And the application was published. Now I can refresh here in API genres, and as you can see, we still have the error. That is fine. Application insights will not solve our error, but it will help us investigating it. So now let me go to portal.azure.com. I want to go to resource groups, and I want to go to Movies API because I want to go to my application insights instance, which is this one. And now here in failures, I should have the details of the error. Now sometimes this may take a while to get updated, so we just have this error here. So this usually takes like 5 minutes or so. So I will be right back in 5 minutes. And we're back. Let me refresh the page. And now as you can see, we have an error here. We have a 404 here in the get slash. This is in the root because we don't have anything there, but we're interested in this one, the get API genres. Let me close this. We have a 500 here. I can click on here, and I can click on here, and this will give me the details of this error. As you can see, the error happened in the API/genres route, response code 500. This is the whole URL, but what I want to see is the call stack. Let me say just my code, and now here I can see where the exception was thrown, and as you can see, it was in a file called startup in the line 56. Okay, so let's see what is going on in line 56 of the startup class. Let me go here, Solution Explorer, let me go to the startup class, and let's go to line 56, which is this one. Oh, okay, so in line 56 we have this, we have all of this. So what the error is telling me is that there is some sort of situation going on here. Now, of course, we know that we forgot to add the key JWT here in the app settings.json file, which is something we can fix right away. But instead of doing it here, I want to show you that you can have configuration in your Azure App Service. So let me go to here, to Azure. I want to look for resource groups. Let me go to Movies API because I want to go to the App Service. So I will click on here, and here we have configuration. And in this configuration, I can have settings about my application. For example, here I have connection strings, and here I have the production connection string. But what I want to add is an application setting, which is exactly the same as what we are doing here. This is just a simple configuration like this one. So let me come here, let me copy this name, and let me come here, and let me say here new application setting. The name will be key JWT, and the value will be whatever value I want that is really long, like this one. Now let me say OK, and after saying OK, I have to save, continue, and now this will add that configuration setting into my application, as you can see here. Now if I go back to here and I refresh, you should see that it is now taking a while, and we got back a 401. Great! It is not a 400, I mean it is not a 500, it is a 401 because we don't have permissions to access this endpoint. But if we go to /all, you are going to see that now we receive an empty array. Why is that? Well, because we don't have any genres in our database, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that now our application is running in production, at least our web API. Now we have to go and work with our React application. We're going to see that next. In this video, we are going to deploy our React application into production. We're going to deploy to Firebase. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go to our env.production file, which is our file for environment variables for production, and we're going to put here the URL of our web API. So let me go to Google Chrome. And I want to get this URL. This is the URL of our production web API, and we're going to paste that here. And that is fine. Now let me minimize this so that you can see everything. Now besides that, I want to put here generate source map equal to false. What does this mean? This means that we're not going to be generating the source map of our application, which will make our application lighter for production. So let me save. And now let me open the terminal, new terminal. And I want to say npm run build. Let me press enter, and this is going to compile our whole application so that we can release that into production. As you can see, this is creating an optimized production build. Now this is done. As you can see, if we go to the Explorer, we can see that in build we have the final files of our application. This is what we are going to deploy. Now let me continue. Let me go back to the console because we need to work. Now I need to say npm install Firebase tools because I need to install some tools related to Firebase. So what I will do is that I need to open a terminal as an admin. So Windows key, because I need to say cmd command prompt, right click, run as administrator, yes. And then here, I need to say npm install-g Firebase tools, enter, and this will install the Firebase tools so that we can work with Firebase from a terminal. And this is done. Now I can close this, and I can come here, and I can say Firebase login, enter. In my case, I am already logged. But let me say Firebase logout and then Firebase login, just so you see the experience of logging in. I will say yes here, and this will open this page. You must select your account, then you must select allow or permit here. In my case, this is login successful, so we can go back to here. Now after that, I have to say Firebase init, enter. And this will initialize this directory as a Firebase project, which means that we will be able to later deploy this to production. So let me say yes, I'm ready. Now I need to select hosting, so I will use the arrow key of my keyboard to move down to hosting, space, enter. We are going to say create a new project, enter. I need to give it a unique name, so React movies, something like this, enter. I will call my project as the project ID, so enter. And this is creating the project in Firebase. This is done. Now here I need to say build, because remember that our files are in a directory called build, so enter. This will be a spa, so yes, enter. Automatic builds and deploys with GitHub, no, enter. Override the index.html, no, because we have our own one, enter. And we are almost good to go. We just have to say Firebase deploy, enter, and this is going to deploy whatever it is in the build directory into Firebase. And this is doing its job, and this is done. Now this is the hosting URL, so let me copy this, and let me go back to here, and let me say here this. and here we have our React application, but there is still one thing that we need to do. We have an error, of course, because we need to configure this URL as the URL configuring course in our web API. So let me go to Azure. I am here in my application settings. This is in the Azure page. This is in the Azure App Service page. We were in configuration, and in here we are going to add a new application setting. So new application setting, and let me go to, and let me put here the value. Let me remove this slash at the end, and let me go back to Visual Studio because I need to copy the name of this property, front-end URL. And let me go back here, let me put it here, OK, and save here, continue. And this is updating the app settings. Now, sometimes this change takes a few seconds, so let me refresh here, and let me see that we don't have any errors. It doesn't seem like we're getting any errors, so we are going to be able to communicate with our web API. And as you can see, there are no elements to display. And not only that, I think I can register myself. Let me say felipe@hotmail.com, and let me use my password. Let me use this password, send, and as you can see, let me say never. As you can see, we are indeed registered in our production application, and not only that, but we have our React application and web API in production talking to each other. We publish our ASP.NET Core application in an Azure App Service. We also created our database in the cloud from Entity Framework Core migrations. We use Application Insights to see an error in our application in production, and then we fix it. We also publish our React application on Firebase for free. I hope you enjoyed this course. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one.